Okay, well, we're going to run through some examples of properties of real numbers. This is going to correspond roughly, for the most part anyway, to examples that you see on both 12 and 13, pages 12 and 13 of your textbook. And in some cases, I've added a couple. But let's just take a look. Now, here we're being asked to name the property of real numbers. And so let's look at this first example here. So we've got 2x, times x plus 3 equals 2x plus 6. Well, this is going to be distributive property. This is an example of the distributive property. And I can see if I distribute the 2 to the x, that's going to give me 2x. And distribute the 2 to the positive 3, it's going to give me 6. 2x plus 6 equals 2x plus 6. And if I'm naming the property illustrated, I'm going to say that it is the distributive property. Now let's look at this second one just briefly. I've got 3 times x. Let me just make note, of course this is algebra 2, so we should all know that. 3 times 2 equals x times 3. And this is an example of the commutative property of multiplication. And if you go back and you look at your real property numbers chart, the commutative property of multiplication, a times b equals b times a. And that's an illustration of what we see right here. Now let's move forward to the next set of examples. Now here we're asked to find the additive and multiplicative inverse properties of a couple of numbers here. So again, just as a review, the additive inverse property is when two numbers are added together, they're going to equal 0. The multiplicative inverse, slightly different, a little bit different, stating that when two numbers are multiplied together, they're going to equal 1. So let's see. Here we've got a decimal. So we got 1.25. Well, the additive inverse is going to be, I'm going to write this in red, is going to be negative 1.25. Because when I add, if I add a positive 1.25 to a negative 1.25, I'm going to get 0. That's going to be the additive inverse. And the multiplicative inverse is going to be the reciprocal of the number we're looking at. So here we got 1 1/4. There's several different ways that we could go about this. I'm going to convert this 1 1/4, 1.25, into a improper fraction. So 1 1/4 will be the same thing as 5/4. That equals 1.25, which then means that the multiplicative inverse is actually going to be 4/5. So if I take 5/4, which is the rewriting 1 1/4, times 4/5, well, that's going to equal 1. And if I were to rewrite, let's say if I were to rewrite this 4/5 back into a decimal form, or if I divided 5 into 4, then I would get 0.8. So this would be correct. This would be correct. Another thing that would actually be technically correct is 1/1.25. That also would equal 1. So there's 3 possible answers that I can think of just real quickly that would give us the multiplicative inverse for this number 1 problem here. Now, the second one is 2 1/2. And again, I'm going to, we'll start with the additive inverse. The additive inverse is just simply going to be negative 2 1/2. 2 1/2 minus 2 1/2 is going to give me 0. That's the additive inverse. And to get the multiplicative inverse, again, I'm going to convert that 2.5 into an improper fraction. So 2.5 equals 5/2. And then therefore, my multiplicative inverse is going to be 2/5. All right, there we go. Let's move on. We'll move forward to the next one. Now here we're going to have a real world application, I guess you would say, of using the distributive property. So we've got this word problem. It's Kayla. She makes $8 per hour working at a grocery store. And the number of hours that Kayla worked each day in 1 week were 3, 2.5, 2, 1, and 4. How much money did Kayla earn this week? And so if I'm going to rewrite that in a distributive property, I could then say, well, 8 times 3 plus 2.5 plus 2 plus 1 plus 4. And so 8 is the number of hours. The 3, 2.5, 2, 1, and 4 are the number of hours that she worked. Now, 8 is the amount of money she earns per hour. And the 3, the 2.5, the 2, the 1, and the 4 is how many hours she worked in a given week. And so then we've got 8 times, let's see, 3. I'm going to add 3, 2, 1. So that's 3 and 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10, plus the 2.5 is 12. I got 12.5 hours total for the week. And 8 times 12.5 is going to give me $100 that Kayla earned this week. That's taking a real world application and applying the distributive property. All right, so lastly here we're being asked to simplify expressions. And let's see, I'm going to write this first one out. So we've got 3 times 4x minus 2y minus 2 times 3x plus y. All right, so we're going to use our distributive property. And I'm going to distribute the 3 to the 4x. That's going to give me 12x. And I'm going to distribute the 3 to the negative 2y. And notice that I don't consider that minus 2y. I'm thinking about that as a negative 2y. I'm thinking about that as a term rather than this negative sign here. I'm thinking, rather than thinking about that as an operation, I'm thinking about that as a term. So 3 times negative 2y is going to give me negative 6y. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Rather than thinking about this as an operation, I'm going to think about that as a negative 2. So I got negative 2 times 3x. That's going to give me negative 6x. And I've got negative 2 times y. It's going to give me negative 2y. And now that I've got my distribution done, all I've got to do is combine like terms. So I've got like terms here I got a 12x. I got a negative 6x, and I've got a negative 6y and a negative 2y. So all I've really got to do is combine those like terms. So 12x minus 6x is going to give me 6x. And negative 6y minus 2y is going to give me negative 8y. And we've simplified that as far as we can go with what we know. All right, now let's look at the number 2. We got 3x plus 5y plus 2x minus 3y. Well, really all I've got to do here is combine like terms. So let's see what we got. I got a 3x here, and I got a 2x here. And then I've got a 5y here and a negative 3y there. And so if I combine those like terms, well, 3x plus 2x is going to be 5x. And positive 5y minus 2y is going to give me a positive 2y. Combining those like terms, 5x plus 2y, we've simplified it. We are done.